My name is Nicole Daly, and I'm with the Boston Public Health Initiative with the Start Strong program.
I'm Melissa Marcial, and I'm leading the prevention coordinator at Casa.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Cohen from ATASK, and I'm the Director of Education at the Task Force.
I am your moderator this afternoon. My name is Laura Penney. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Safe Passage in Northampton. We're a JVI member program. I'm the community director of community engagement there. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be sitting over here. Without further ado, I'm going to come up and start us off. How are you guys doing? Doing okay after lunch? Feeling energized, pumped up? Alright, so as I said, I'm Kayla LeMay. I'm the project coordinator of our Engaging Men and Boys program with the Center for Hope and Healing. So the Center for Hope and Healing, we're the local rape crisis center that serves the greater Lowell area. So speaking of Lowell, I thought I would provide a little bit of context and talk about the community that we serve there. So in Lowell is the 4th largest city in Massachusetts. 47% of Lowell residents identify as minorities, and I put it in quotes because I personally don't like that word, but that is the word that the census uses, so that's why it's up here. And 1/3 are immigrants. 16% live below the poverty level, and that includes 23%, which are children under the age of 18, and 31% of families with single mothers. 21% of youth dropped out of high school, and only 45% of young adults have graduated college. And it's the 18th highest city in the nation for violent crime. So I wanted to put it out to all of you and ask, why is this important? Why is it to know this type of information when you talk about prevention? Yes. Yes. What else? I think I saw some hands in the back.
Feel when your constituents where you're at?
Yes, absolutely. Any other thoughts? So to bring in what Nubia mentioned this morning, all of these things interconnect, right? They all relate to each other, and they all relate to sexual violence, which is the work that we do. And to know your community, you're able to learn how to prevent sexual violence. So what we did in Lowell is we did a strengths and needs assessment for the community. So we went to the community, we went to our youth, we went to community leaders, people who work with youth, and asked them, what are the good things about this community? What are the things about this community that help you and help you grow? And what are the things that it can improve on? What do you need from the community that isn't being met right now? So I have some quotes from the needs assessment. So they said, they, meaning young men of color, do not speak the language and do not know what is available out there. I mentioned there's a large immigrant community and a large refugee community. A lot of them don't speak English, and so that's a barrier for them to receive services who may only provide services in English. I feel like we don't have a lot to do, so we feel like we can go out or just hang out and smoke some weed. Between the ages of 18 to 24, there is a black hole there. No job, no programs, and no hope for the future if you do not go to college. And lastly, they, meaning men of color, still believe that the men dictate the rules in the house and a good wife will follow. So this one in particular is really important in the work that I do in preventing sexual violence, because we know that strict gender roles that happen in the community, in the home, in our institutions, that adds to rape culture and a system that breeds higher rates of sexual violence and domestic violence. So we did this needs assessment, and then we look at the results. What did it say, and what does it mean for us? So we know that young men of color, ages 18 to 24, they're reporting no to limited access to services. There's nowhere for them to go, right? One of those quotes says, there's nowhere for them to go or spend their time, so they end up on the streets smoking weed and possibly getting into crime. We know there's a huge need to reach out to this community. No one is reaching out to them, so somebody has to, right? And then lastly, we know that young men of color are not going to walk into our doors. They're not going to walk into a rape crisis center, right? We can outreach to them, but the stigma is still there. what's important is for us to go to them, us to meet them where we're at, which that came up, right? So we came up with this idea for, it's called Buzz for Safety. And we figured that if young men of color are not going to walk into our doors, we need to go to where they're at. And what we heard from the community is that young men of color, they go to barbershops, right? They get their hair cut every week, every 2 weeks. And barbershops have really historically provided this great culture and community, particularly for young men of color. They go there, they get support, they get resources, they have mentors there, people to talk to. So that has been a really safe place for young men of color to go to. So we thought, if that's where they're already at, let's move them there. So we partnered with the University of Massachusetts in Lowell. We're really fortunate to have UMass Lowell in our area to be able to partner with us on campaigns such as this. So they provided the evaluation portion of it. So what they did was they did free interviews with each barbershop owner and talked to them or asked them about what are they currently doing? What is their current knowledge of sexual violence and preventing it and men and boys and all of that. And then we did a series of free workshops at each barbershop. And the topics included Sexual Violence 101, just the basics of what sexual violence is, what's that definition. We talked about different definitions of manhood and gender roles in more importantly there. Yeah. So what does it mean to be a man? The difference between healthy masculinity and toxic masculinity. We talked about the spectrum of violence, men's role in preventing sexual violence, right? That's what I do specifically, that's my job. So that was definitely incorporated. And then effective bystander intervention, because we wanted to really have them walk away with concrete tools and strategies for if they witness or anything or they hear anything going on, how can they intervene and help stop that. So these are just some pictures. So the top left one is a local barbershop, and they're on the route to our Take Back the Night event, which is actually tonight. And so they're all holding up signs where they fill in what they do to create a community free from sexual violence. So that was one example of how the barbershops were involved in the work that we do. And then the other three around the edge are pictures of us in the barbershops, doing the workshops, and having these discussions with them. And then in the middle, what we did is we created these combs, right? Barbers got hair, they use combs, right? So, and the combs say Buzz for Safety and our hotline number. So this was a really easy way for us to provide our resources to those who go to barbershops, so they can have this thing that they can actually use. There's a practical use for it, and it has our hotline number if they have any questions that come up. So the barbershops kept these combs in their shops. So what were the results? What did we do? What was the impact? So as far as who we reached, 69% of the participants were men, 51% were men of color, and 27% and 28% wrote and spoke a language other than English, respectively. So what that tells us is that we reached out to who we wanted to reach out to, right? We wanted to reach out to men of color, and the results showed us that we actually did that. So that was a great success. And also, participants were engaged. So one of the questions on the questionnaires that we gave them asked them how involved they felt that they were in the workshop. How much did they participate themselves? And so the average score was 3.69 out of 5, and 5 being as engaged as they could be the most. So that was a really positive result for us, because it showed that they were interested enough to be engaged and participate. However, there were challenges too, right? This is the first time we've done this. And there's really not any other program like it, at least in our area. So there's going to be challenges. And so what we noticed is that the workshop style didn't work. It wasn't ideal. So I'm a social worker. I go to these workshops all the time, right? You guys are all in a workshop right now, right? It's an environment that a lot of us are used to. Barbers, not so much, right? Barbers are very hands-on. When you go to barber school, you don't sit in a workshop and learn about how to cut your hair, right? You cut hair. You do it, right? And so that they're more used to hands-on learning. And also for the barber commitment, it was really difficult for the barbers to commit to the time that was needed for this campaign. They have these shops, that's their business, that's how they get their money. They don't have the ability to shut down their shop for a few hours, right? So what we saw is when we're doing these workshops, you probably saw in the pictures that people are getting their hair cut while we're doing the workshop, right? So we're speaking over clippers and music in the background, and that was a way for us we needed to adapt to that type of environment because they had to keep the shop open, they needed an income, right? So we've taken in these challenges, we've looked at them, we've gone back to the barbers and said, how can we change this? How can we update it so it works better for you and your community? So that's what we're working on right now is adapting it and improving on it. So I know we're doing a panel. Okay. So I'll take questions until the Q&A later, but that is for me.
Again, my name is Nicole Daly. I work with Start Strong, which is a teen violence prevention program of the Boston Public Health Commission.
Hello everyone, my name is Vanessa Marcel and I'm the Youth Engagement and Prevention Coordinator at Casa, Myrna, and we're a youth agency located in Boston. So a little overview of Casa Myrna. We were established in 1977 by a woman named Myrna, and she was a Puerto Rican actress and activist, and she just organized members of the South End community in Boston and just had a grassroots organization that she rounded up and started providing services for women survivors of domestic violence. We're also a multicultural organization, and we're one of Boston's largest providers of domestic violence awareness efforts, shelters, support services to survivors of domestic violence. We also deliver solutions to end domestic violence through intervention, awareness prevention, and education. And we have a lot of services both in English and Spanish, providing survivors with tools and skills they need to overcome the effects of trauma and some of the services that we provide are housing assistance, advocacy. We have, sorry, that was a little typo. We have 2 residential programs now. We have a teen parenting program, and we also have an emergency shelter. We also provide individuals with counseling, child and youth services, as well as safety, which is Casa Myrna's, it's housed in Casa Myrna, the 24/7. It is a toll-free domestic violence hotline that provides supportive listening, safety planning, and any resources in Massachusetts that a survivor might need. And we're also, which is the whole point of the presentation, we're also collaborating with Start Strong and implementing a youth peer leader program at Casa Myrna and teaching them the tools that they need to go back into the community and teach other teams about healthy relationships.
Yeah, so Vanessa and I are excited to be here today because just as much as we're going to talk about our partnership as agencies, we're also going to talk about our partnership with young people in the community and how we work with them as equal partners in the work to end teen dating violence. So usually when I do these presentations, we have the young people come, so oftentimes I'll get a request and then I'll say to myself like, oh, can I bring a young person? Just because the time of day and the nature of the workshop, I don't have a young person here with me when we're peer leaders, but I'm going to invite them into the space via YouTube. And give me 1 second. And then I'll explain a little bit more about it.
I come to the campus first time to me is like a family and a helping hand. Start strong. It's a family family. A family will at the Boston Public Health Commission, and it's run by interns and adults such as Jess Alder, Dara Songs, Nicole Daly, and Clifton, and then also the interns such as Ayana. 20 teens, and we all go to Boston Public Schools, and we're all from Boston, and we all just talk about what we feel and how we can change the world and change the world in our way, like domestic violence with teenagers, and basically promoting healthy relationships, talking about healthy breakups, and just a way to prevent abuse in teen relationships and trying to make a difference.
We need to try to make the change in this world for the teenagers. Every Thursday, we are all assigned to community centers. And we are into the community centers. And we have to keep to our relationships.
Some people like listen to the songs and like they don't know what the song is singing until like we put it out. Music to me by just watching these videos. It's like the Central Show. Basically just rated like with sex, like relation, being fun, stress.
So at the speak of summer, it's getting through and talk about all these issues in their lives. It's basically saying what they feel and not feel like if they say something, they're lesser than they are. So it's also about talking and about getting your ideas out there and saying that you are important.
Breakups in the now we talk about ways to break up. We also talk about gender norms, like for example, like men are supposed to cry.
When they have sex with a lot of dudes, they call it other stuff. And when dudes have sex with other girls, it's like, they get into that.
They gave going back.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to challenge them, and I was supposed to say, hey, we don't have to fit into these things society puts us in. Teen relationships are really real. Adults don't take teen relationships seriously, and us as teens, we gather a bunch of us together. We just know that we are powerful, that we do matter. Cheerleaders work to rally entire communities to promote healthy relationships as a way to prevent teen dating violence and abuse. I Start Strong, we work together with teens, parents, caregivers, educators, healthcare professionals, domestic violence advocates, and community leaders to build environments that support healthy relationships and ensure violence is never tolerated. Start Strong's model is to use initiative and interactive strategies to educate and engage youth in schools and out-of-school settings.
Like I said, I wanted to bring their voice into the room because all of this is about them and the work that we do. I often say that the work that we do at Start Strong as adults is not about what we can do as adults, but really giving them the space, giving them the tools that they inherently have just for them to have their voices amplified, giving them the outlet to go into the community. So we do the background work and then we just let them shine. And then also we collaborate with them because they help us keep up with what domestic violence, what dating violence looks like in their world and helps us stay relevant. So what we do is we have a cohort of peer leaders who we train during the summer, and then during the school year they go out to community centers, after school programs, and they do trainings and presentations. One of the things that's most important in our work as a principal is oftentimes we want to invite them people to the table, but we don't think about what the table looks like. So we're like, oh, we want young people in the work that we do as an agency or at work. And sometimes the table's not even set for them to be there. And so oftentimes it's thinking about little things like logistics of, what time are the meetings happening so that they can take part in it, or other things like how much jargon is being used at these meetings so that are they able to have a meaningful conversation when they're there. And so we consider them more than just group leaders. They are the experts in their own lives. They do any number of trainings for adults as well as teens. So we have them present at Harvard School of Education all the way to the work that they're doing at community centers because their voice is valuable and they can share things in a way that we can't. And then the thing that's been really valuable about the work is that the impact is there. We know that when young people have the chance to explore these issues and challenge their norms and have the space to challenge these norms, that you'll see it reflected in how they think and see and view the world. So our young people, have found ways to think about jealousy in different ways. Because when we hire them, we don't just hire them because they came to us already believing certain things about violence prevention. No, all they have to say is, we have an interest in talking about relationships. Even in their interviews, sometimes they'll say the wrong things in interviews, and we're like, we want you in our program because we know that once you have this space to explore and think about what society's telling us about relationships and think about what they want from relationships, they naturally know, and as in all people, know what we want in healthy relationships. So again, they're valuable at the table as equal partners. And I'm just going to show a couple of tools and things that we created through our partnership with their work. So about 7 years ago, the Academy of American Pediatrics came out with a statement paper saying that music lyrics have a direct correlation with health outcomes. It wasn't causational, it wasn't like, you listen to this type of music, you're going to have poor health outcomes, but there was connections being seen. So we're like, how do we talk about these with young people? How do we talk about music? How do we talk about media? And this is the first of a series of tools that really just allows us to have fruitful conversations about song lyrics. And again, this came from the partnership because we're like, well, what are the themes you're hearing in music? What's really salient for you? Because we could have chosen stuff that, as adults, we're like, oh, this is important to talk to young people about. But if they weren't naturally hearing it in the music themselves, then it wasn't going to be as meaningful. So some of the unhealthy relationship ingredients were like drama, disrespect, and some of those pieces. And then what makes a healthy relationship for them? The same thing, we can identify the top 5, but what do they identify the top 5 being? So on the flip side, there's like support and respect. Another tool that has been really useful is the Hall's web series. So it sits online, it sits on a website, which is currently down, but we're getting it back up and running. And it has 8 episodes, and it follows the lives of 3 young men in high school, and some of those big picture like themes that feed into relationships. And the reason why we chose those is because we can just work with our young people, but we're always seeking ways to do focus groups and needs assessments before we start doing any work. Because how do we invite other young people into the conversation? How do we make sure we're tapping into the community's voice? So we did those focus groups with young men, and we found that, a lot of themes came up. And one of them being around homophobia, another being around the inability to be vulnerable. A third was around consent, because they could name consent, but they couldn't explain consent, which meant they didn't have a true understanding of what that meant for them. And then when we thought about relationships, same thing, the key buzzwords like communication, trust, but then when we started to dig deeper into it, it was like a lot of the explanations weren't really grounded. And again, when I speak of young people, it's because I work with, I think a lot of adults have the same thing, so I don't ever apologize if people say like they didn't know, but like adults somehow have it together. We were doing this education together, but during these focus groups, this is what came out from the young men we were talking to. And so then again, they felt some pressure from young women to act a certain way, for the ones who identified as straight. And then when we talked about what's a healthy relationship, it was a lot around co-parenting. And again, it wasn't necessarily about marriage, but it was about can 2 people work together for the benefit of their families and what's going on, and minimize drama. But then one thing was very clear was that they wanted to talk about relationships. We didn't have to talk about recruiting participants, because it's all been traditionally said that, and women want to talk about this, but young men don't. No, a lot of young men really want to figure relationships out. They're very committed to this as well. And then the last piece is the Breakup Summit. And again, we just kind of work on it every year, and they just kind of modify it to their liking. We just talk to young people about what's relevant for them.
So really quickly, some of our partnership goals, we were able to get a grant through the Office of Violence Against Women, and that was allowing us to expand the capacity for young people to do teen domestic violence prevention work, as well as to expand Safe Links reach to the teen chatline, which we're hoping to launch in the fall of 2017. So these are some of the goals that we have with the grant that we received from OEO.
And so we did a needs assessment around it, and that's where we kind of came up and as added to the 2 goals. And so one is Start Showing is one program. There are other youth programs that are doing great work, like Jen is going to talk a lot about ATASK and the great work they're doing, but there's not enough young people within the city of Boston or even Massachusetts doing this work. So how do we break off and how do we get another cohort of young people doing this work? And one thing we're super excited about is that we have survivors doing this work. I mean, implicitly with Start Strong, there are going to be survivors in the mix, but we're not hiring survivors. And we're trying to think about how do we allow young people to turn this around and become advocates as well. So we're super excited about this partnership and what the peer leadership group that Casa Myrna is going to build out will look like.
So just a little bit about our youth peer leaders. Many years ago when I first started Casa Myrna, we had our own teen peer leader program called STAR. And unfortunately, we lost funding to that. We haven't had a program for youth as far as youth peer leaders in a long time. So luckily, with the grant, we're able to start our own program. I just hired 8 teens, and it's a paid position. So we're looking forward to starting soon with them and doing our own orientation at Casa Myrna, excuse me, as well as having Start Strong come in and do a training of the trainer kind of thing. Excuse me. We are recruiting and engaging youth from the Boston area. And we're training them with Start Strong on delivering teen dating violence workshops to other youth in Boston. So it'll be after school, during the school year, about twice a week that we're hoping to do these workshops with them. And we're also going to train them to work the Safe Link chat line, the teen chat line, for the fall of 2017. And we also partner with other domestic violence and sexual violence agencies and after school programs to implement the grant program that we have. So we look forward to working with Start Strong with Nicole and Jess and doing all of this with our teams.
Thank you.
Hi all, how are you doing? Thanks for being present in today's presentation. So I'm Jen, again, the Director of Education at ATASK, and I'm going to talk to you all about what we do. Cool. So ATASK is a nonprofit agency based in Boston. We also have a second office in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is about an hour north of the city of Boston. And our mission is to prevent domestic violence in Pan-Asian communities and families and to provide hope to survivors. We were founded in 1992, and we are currently still the only culturally specific and linguistically specific full-service domestic violence agency for Pan-Asian survivors. Right? So Pan-Asian means the entire continent, the diaspora, in the state of Massachusetts. And so we actually tend to get a lot of client referrals from all over England, and we've gotten clients from New York as well. But we primarily serve Eastern Massachusetts. So I don't want to go over all of our services, but right now we currently serve 17 different Asian languages. That is really dependent on who we hire within our staff. So our advocates and our prevention staff are really amazing. A lot of them are multilingual, not just bilingual. And so depending on funding or depending on who comes and goes within our staff, this will change, and it will vary between maybe 11 or 12 languages to 19 or 20 languages. And if we had more funding and more capacity, then we would hope to serve about 20 to 25, maybe 30 more Asian languages, because there's that many within the diaspora. And so these are the languages that are represented because of really who are the highest populations within the city of Boston and Lowell and in the greater the metro area. So those are our direct services, and I think you have access to these slides, but I really want to focus on the bottom half, which is our prevention programs. So we have community education and community outreach programs. We go out to immigrant communities that are Asian, that are in the greater Boston area, and Lowell as well, and we tell them who we are and what we do, right? We don't talk necessarily about domestic violence, but we talk about immigrant issues, we talk about family issues, healthy relationships, and a lot of times we will also bridge in domestic violence, but we don't necessarily use that language. But a lot of the immigrant communities are experiencing that, but they don't want to come out to community outreach programs that are talking about TV, right? Survivors don't want to come out because they're scared, and then also it's a taboo topic. So that's for our adult community members. And then for the education part of service providers, we target a lot of medical providers, doctors and dentists and nurses, also other social services providers. So if you're working at DTA or DPH, we want to come talk to you. Folks who are guidance counselors at schools and teachers and administrators at colleges and high schools. Folks like after school programs, things like that. We want to talk to service providers. And we have a series of modules and trainings. We're all in high school and all teenagers. they're going out to community festivals and outreach events with us and fairs, and they're talking to adults and people their own age about ATASK services. And then by the time it's March, they're doing a Denim Day campaign, and we'll talk more about that later. But then they do workshops and presentations with their peers as well. And so if they graduate from the program, we invite them to come back to the alumni program. They get a chance to mentor young people their age who are coming in as new youth, and they also get a chance to edit the curriculum as well and facilitate it. And if we feel like they have a lot of potential to become stronger facilitators, then they get a chance to join the Engaging Masculinities Project. It's intentionally called that because we believe that gender-based violence is not just about the binary of men and women, but it's about all folks and of all genders who can hold masculinity. Right? So that means folks who are men and women, and folks who are gender non-conforming, folks who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. All of us have masculinity, like power, right, and energy. And so what does it mean for us to talk about breaking down gender-based violence in that way? And so our primary target is young men and boys who are Asian, but also men of color, and LGBTQ youth. And then if we are going out into the community, so this is all like our internal programs, then we also do dating violence workshops at local high schools and colleges. And that's generally around dating violence for young people, and then we talk about gender and race as well. Cool, so what is our strategy? We believe that it's important for us to start in our communities, right? We're not the experts as service providers, right? In order for us to stay relevant, we have to go out to the community and ask them, hey, like, what are the things that are most important to you as an immigrant community, right? As young people of color, right? As folks who are working class. So we ask them, what do you want us to talk to you about, right? Is it around housing? Is it around education access? Is it around, community trauma? Is it around intergenerational gaps between you and your parents? Like, are you having conversations about healthy relationships, right? So we ask them, and then we try to modify the curriculum in order to meet their needs. Because we know that they're the experts in their lives and not us, right? When we hire people from our communities, whether that's interns and volunteers or staff and board, we want to make sure that if we're serving a certain community and a certain population, then those folks are also becoming leaders, and they're the ones who are the advocates. They're the ones who are the preventionists. They're the ones who are the youth leaders who are getting paid, right? So that's really important for us. Another thing that I'll note is that the data isn't going to represent folks, right? For the folks that are really marginalized, folks that are within the margins, particularly when you look at data that represents pan-Asian experiences, it's not deaggregated, right? And so it doesn't account for folks who are from Southeast Asian populations. It doesn't account for folks who are Pacific Islanders or South Asians, who are low class, who don't have education, who are refugees, etc. Right? And so it's really important for us to not rely on national or federal data, but to go out and get data that is more qualitative, right? So that's really important for us to go out and get that information. So we have to be creative in our prevention approaches because we don't have another choice, right? We have to be innovative. There are no best practice models for when you're talking to pan-Asian immigrant communities, right? They don't exist, so we have to create our own. So I want to highlight a relationship that we have with a really amazing organization called Aid. And they're based in Dorchester, Massachusetts, which is home to a huge Vietnamese enclave, but also home to a lot of other immigrant communities, like from the Afro-Caribbean and Latino Caribbean communities that are based in Boston. And so we work really closely with them, and Aid does a lot of direct services as well. And so we've been doing for, I think, maybe 20 or 30 years, mutual referrals around how do we get clients in the door at ATASK, right, who identify as immigrants who don't have language access. And then Aid, we started to more intentionally form a relationship with them around their youth programming because they also have an after-school and summer program. And we're like, why don't we partner together? So the last 4 years, you're going to see a video from Aid soon, but they've been hosting an event at their location that our youth and their youth collaborate on, and we invited a third organization called Matchkosh, and they mainly work, and they're also based in Dorchester. Matchkosh mainly works with Black and Latino youth, and so it's really great to see that these young people are from 3 different organizations who have 3 different, I think, specialties, but the end goal is they want to end community and gender-based violence, right? So we want to hear from them. Go back to this slide. So this is Caro, and she's the Assistant Director of Youth Programs.
Especially from a young person's perspective, there's so many healthy examples of relationships and really confusing messages about love that, in the media we see that, to love someone is super possessive, to say like, I care about you,
why I do these things. And it's so confusing, right? And I think there's also this layer of there's no explicit conversation about what is policy and policy. There's a repression, we learn really repressive things and we act out on each other, and then the cycle of violence. And then I think one thing I think about a lot for the Middle East community as folks who were displaced because of state violence, state-sanctioned violence, and violence between nation states, how violence shows up in the family dynamics, let's say like a male-headed household, and how, I've heard stories of domestic violence, and how for me that so much is interconnected, and if we don't question that, right, that cycle continues, this type of violence continues in that family. So for the young people, there's so many different layers. One is they're a young person, they're Vietnamese, they're racialized as Asian, they're working class, low income. So all of this training them to be quiet, right? Training them to be very docile and say like, oh, like why are we being loud on the streets? Like this is not okay, right? And for them, it's like mind blowing to take over a street, right? It's mind blowing to like be public about this, to say this out loud. And so I think having this rally every single year to be out on the streets and to say like, whatever that's oppressive that's happening in our family or with each other is not private, right? It's a public issue. It's something that people in our community to really address. And every year it's like yeah, like we get to put on the streets, you get to be loud. And this is our community, right? Like this is our Dorchester. And I think anytime they come out on the streets, I think they get to take back of their voice that has been so domesticated through school, domesticated through adultism. We're going through some brain like isolation and alienation. I think too this oppressive individualism that we won't take care of ourselves, and what the only sustainable way is to take care of each other.
So that was the that was on. So again, the relationship really started out as a mutual referral to mental services, and then we said, how can we move this into a prevention relationship? And so all three youth from all the organizations share the responsibilities of the event planning, the logistics, of getting fundraising, getting folks to donate food, and they all show up together. So that event was last night. So if we have time, I can show you the photos from that night. So I think that my question for y'all is, what are the opportunities that you have that are already existing, right, in your relationships right now? Are there ways for you to deepen your relationships with folks that you're already doing work with, right? Like again, like for V8, like that, that was a really good example, right? Because we were already doing work with them, and then we said, how do we want to deepen this? What are the opportunities are you doing? Are you going to do workshop trades? Are you going to help promote each other's events? Are you going to plan an event together? Do you want to pay each other for your services? There's so many ways for you to be creative in order to do that, and you don't have to start from scratch. There are already relationships that are out there that make sense, right? That are mutually beneficial to both of y'all. If you have a similar goal of prevention and gender-based violence, right? And I think the last thing that I want to say is that, just to go back to the first thing I said about cultural competency, right, is that justice and cultural competency is a progress and it's a spectrum. And even for us at ATASK, like we're always asking ourselves, what can we do better? Right? As an institution, as an agency that has power, we want to make sure that we're questioning ourselves, and we want to make sure that we're showing up for our communities in the ways that they want us to, and not in the ways that we think are the best. And so we ask ourselves, who are we not serving? Right? How can we do that in better ways? What communities are we not reaching? Right? How can we improve our programs and services? So these are the questions that we want to ask ourselves, and I would invite you to ask yourself similar questions around how you can improve your work as well. Thank you. So this was, you can see it, but these are all 3 youth programs, and so, and then the sign in the back says Take Back the Night. And that's their rally that Carl was talking about, so they literally marched in the street. And last night it was raining for it, they did not complain. They just marched for like, I think it was a 30-minute march for like a 2-mile walk. And they just made noise, and they said, this is our community, we want to end violence. So this was the open mic that we have. These are the youth from the society. ATASK.
I just want to take a second to appreciate these lovely folks who gave us so much information. I'm sure most people in the room can recognize how hard it is to talk about a program that you care so deeply about in such a short amount of time, right? And so we want to leave some space for you all. I'm sure that your mind is kind of buzzing about the different programs. So leave some space to ask any of our panelists questions about their specific programs, any questions you have specifically about building community partners, or building relationships with members of your own community. So just as a reminder, we have the Moderator program. We have these days, wonderful space round. And if I can just impose a question super briefly, I know that you jumped over the breakup summit slide because you're worried about time, and I think it would be really great to just kind of highlight that, because I think it's a really wonderful program. If you would mind.
And that would also save my first question.
Is that okay? And then also we have the retirement program. So just as a refresher, I know folks just had a lot of info in about 45 minutes. And really amazing time for organization. Great. So let's open up the floor for general questions, but we'll start first with maybe a little brief update about the breakup.
Yeah, so the breakup summit came about because when you think about the statistic that one of the most dangerous times for our victims when they leave their partner. And so since Start Strong is focused on family prevention, we said how do we create messaging around having healthy breakups? How do we try to just use that in the conversation when we're talking about relationships in general? So the breakup summit is a once-a-year day where we invite young people from around the city of Boston, so student groups come over people in Berkeley. And then also in the greater Boston area, we have folks from Berlin and other areas, just to talk about it. And so every year we ask our young people, our peer leaders, about what's the theme, what's salient for you this year, what angle should we do, and focus on it. And so the second year was social media, and this year we said, it's really important in communities, so we're doing it again this year. But then just talking about the evolution of the people's opinions and on social norms and that kind of element. So it's a partnership with our young people. We do that since college. And then whatever they have come up with for the year is what we also use in workshops later on. So it's not just a one-time event, but also since they build the workshops, they create them, they then will do them in the community centers and after-school programs throughout the academic year as well.
The summit sort of like the double hand.
Yeah, so we have a track. Yeah, we have two tracks. So during the morning it's intergenerational, but then in the afternoon we separate out the young people and then the adults.
Our staff have been to the summit and all of your
Great answer. Right, other questions for our lovely panelists?
It's not a question, it's an addition to the breakup summit. I attended two of those. One of the most moving times was being with the adults, talking about breakups and their memories of breakups and how hard, painful, and confusing they are. So a focus on that, I think, is really important. The other point is that the senior summer, when we think about it, the transitions going on, people moving to other settings, it is one of the most, I think, potentially dangerous times for many youth, and not all of them, certainly, but for those who are anxious at loose ends, we might think of the senior summer safety nets and how to make sure they're in place for community.
Vanessa, can you tell us about how the chat line to youth will be set up? What's the...
So I'm sorry I didn't elaborate on that. We're working on that right now, as well as starting up our youth leader program. But the youth team chat line is going to be based on a computer. The last meeting that I attended, sorry, I'm going to acknowledge that our CEO is here, Stephanie Brown. So we're just if you have any additional information on it. But it's a team chat line, like a text chat line. So they're going to be on a computer and they're going to answer kind of these little pop-up windows as they come up and provide supportive feedback to their team, to their team, sorry. So, when they did the focus groups, Casa, Myrna, and we started strong before I came on, what they found with these focus groups is that teams want to hear from other teams. So that's why we're working on the team chat line, and we're going to have a team answering those chats. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome.
Do you know what the platform is
Yeah, so it'll be like, instead of week 2, so there'll be a chat line that people can get through the website, and so you just click on it. So we're actually doing a chat line for SafeLink, and then we'll do a separate one for teens, so that people know who's calling, and then a separate text lines as well. So the platform Empower Database, they're that proprietary, Stephen Jenkins is our database provider. He does a lot of the domestic violence program databases. So he's developed this chat line, text line technology. And so, because a lot of our concerns originally was around who gets the numbers, where is it stored, who has the data. So we were really hesitant about going with just sort of like a commercial chat line kind of thing. And then we mentioned it to him, and he said he was developing something. So he's finishing it up now. So we and a few other people are going to like beta test it for him. But so that, and so we've got sort of assurances about, all of the texts or all the chats like disappear after, 30 minutes kind of thing, like super quick. And so we won't be able to even call up a lot of the information, even if we wanted to, because it'll be, completely anonymous and confidential. So that was like the big concern for us around that.
And OVW is okay with this? Because they just gave us a huge chunk of additional confidentiality stuff that we don't.
So we're still talking to our project manager about it, but OVW isn't actually paying for it. So we originally applied to have OVW do it, and they cut our grant. So we're like, all right, you're not paying for that. We can do it on our own. But we still want to do it like in collaboration with them. So.
It's a buzz for safety question. I guess I'm just trying to imagine the conversation where you walk in the door and say, how about if, while you guys are cutting hair, we come in and talk about definitions of manhood? Like, how did you get in the door and get them to agree and have you come in? I'm so impressed that you could even, like, it's such a cool program, but I'm so impressed that you even got a yes or got buy-in for why it'd be important. So I'm just wondering how you approach folks and how you sold the program.
Yeah, great question. So, and we definitely had some barbers that are like, no way, like, do not come here and talk about that stuff. But what we found is most barbers, they're already doing this work in one way or another, right? They're already involved in the community. A lot of them are doing work in like substance abuse prevention or violence prevention in general. And so we were really able to tie our curriculum, our material to those things, right? Because they all interconnect, like I mentioned. So being able to talk to them about like, this is how what we do relates to what you do, and it's a perfect fit. It was also really helpful. We have a phenomenal barber in particular who, his barbershop also is a nonprofit where it's a resource center. And he has an incredible reputation within Lowell, like everybody knows him. So he was able to go to some of the other barbers and say, hey, we're partnering with the Center for Open Healing on this, and you should too. So it was great to have that connection in the community that has such a great reputation to be able to kind of pitch this campaign with the other barbers. So that also helped us out a lot.
So this is related to the barbers. Okay. So they're human for all the English, benefiting songs, but that was good. So it's an easier entree than I would do with the respect of the last gave you for the barbers. It's called Cut It Out, Get Title. And but it does lead one to think, what are the places that have sort of natural therapists? Because their cutting is so intimate in a certain way. And it tends to be with few contact, sort of like shirts on the different. And the other one that always comes to my mind is bartenders. And as natural gathering places where people talk. And I'm just wondering if you or any of you have explored that as another kind of entree to a community. Because my stereotypes, I just love photos. I never really made this time because it's quite different talk. So, has anybody? And does it make sense?
So, and I've also done work in salons too, and like beauty schools and all of that. So it makes sense to also do it with barbers, right? And one cool thing that has happened since the workshop, and I'm not going to take credit for it all, it wasn't anything due to our workshop, but one of the barbershops in particular has hired a therapist to work there. And so I think that just adds to the need. And I know a lot of kids are trained in counseling in one way or another, or like, management, or, so I think that would be a great next step for barbers as well, to really add that next step to the
Yeah. And anybody in the room work with barbers?
Maybe you're going to say what I was going to say something, but Mark a number of years ago, Mark a number of years ago had more of a focus around a sort of an awareness campaign, but not something as in-depth as this, but I think it's definitely a need. So it was more around educating women and working with men to be interveners in situations like if you went to the workshop this morning, we're talking about those intervene and some napkins and safety information, but not a program that's specifically.
I had a friend, a colleague of mine, sends me messages on Facebook regularly and says, relevant to your interests, and I just have this giant list of links from her. But one of them was about a bartender program where they were training bartenders to be able to have these conversations as they're really patrons. But I can't.
Because it's totally associated alcohol with domestic violence, right?
Right. Did you have your hand up?
Well, I have two things now. I've done bartender. I work at college, and so often we have pubs and bars hosting our events for our students. And so we've done a little bit of work around detention states, which I know really is what it is. It's not so much preventative as it is safety planning in the moment. But things like the angel shot, sort of that, you go to the bar or an angel shot, the party you have, and they sort out things in those. And then, or if our students are hosting an event where we will call in advance and say, we ask that you don't, for example, send a drink to someone who didn't order that drink. We want that, those types of things taken care of in advance. It's really some risk management work, but anyway, not my actual question. So like I said, with the college, and because of that, Title IX really gives us some leverage, and by leverage I mean mandate, to have these conversations. And as we know, K-12 has the same mandate, and I'm wondering, with your experiences with these youth, what are these conversations actually looking like in the schools? What is legislation is applicable? Because I got to be honest, when folks come to college, it sort of seems like having this educational-based conversation in the classroom is a totally foreign idea. So I'm wondering if a lot of the work is sort of filling a gap that really should also be happening in the school system as well, and what are you pursuing about that?
It is really hard to get into the schools, I think, because of just the how we go around and talk about daily violence and our relationships. The adults who are headmasters, who are teachers, they make that decision for the young people before they ask the young people, and they say, we don't want our young people to talk about this. But the parents sometimes say, this is too adult for my children to be talking about this, right? So we have to be really creative because, for example, so we work across the state. Every district is going to be a little different. Maybe some person talk about the districts. But we have to get really creative. We go to after school clubs. We go to the nurse's office. We find all the ways to try to get in. We just have to be really creative to do that. Because depending on the school or depending on the district, it's like the other one to do that, right? So just for the city of Boston, for example, there is no mandate to talk about dating violence. We talk about bullying, we talk about cyber abuse, but there is no dating violence. We're not having to just do it ourselves. Policy work is really beautiful.
So I can only speak for our work in the city of Boston and the district. We have been working with the DPS, but the challenges are different in the sense that usually we find that the champion in every school, but in another school, they'll start over from scratch. And so we find that it's not systematic the way we want it to be because it's like revolving. So every year we're partnership with about 5 or 6 schools that we're into. But that next year it could be 5 different schools. And so how do you build scaffolding for the young people? How do you do things in a meaningful way with the staff on board as well? So we find that we're building a voice for them, but building the actual capacity is such a struggle over time. Because I think similarly there's
the desire is there, but I feel like the lack of a mandate means that we're not going to cover up how to make sure that the staff has the capacity to let the work. So I feel like the challenges have been very different. There's the last one they recognize that the issue is there, they recognize it's kind of not for them. They'll call it bullying or call it something else, but so the design is there, but the resources and the manual policies that we need to make sure it's like fundamentally a core part of young people's education is not there.
And we face a lot of the same barriers where, like, not being able to go to schools and all that. So, like Jen was saying, like, in finding creative ways to get to students. So, we at the Center for Open Healing actually had an event last night with my program around like raising healthy boys, and we really reached out to youth and really worked with youth. And it was really successful. We had probably like 70 people attend, and 50 of those I would guess were youth. And so that was a way for us to get to the youth and give them this material, this information outside of the school, where we face a lot of barriers to being in, or what we can say, what we can't say, and all of that. So that was just one way for us to get around all of that.
I was just going to follow up with Marie and say that, yeah, Mark is still doing the bar awareness work in Cambridge, and they're also starting or trying to work with Uber to do some sexual violence awareness, which is now more important than ever. Right, exactly.
The sad part is we knew that so long ago, and it's so amazing that Uber has been able to overtake an entire market and still hire rates. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I remember that. I actually managed a bar. It was on my spare time for being a arrangement. And we do Ask for Angela at my bar, and I've got in 2 or 3 other bars in town do the same thing. Like they're on a Tinder date or like whatever, and just feel drama or going around, just go up to the bartender, tell them Angela sent you, you know, maybe go take you home safely.
And we're just interested in the feedback we got from the barbers about the workshops, this both ideas and kind of in general, and being more specific to the
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of great feedback from the barbers really enjoyed the workshop, and we're working on continuing our work, both in bus for safety and also like other forms of like workshops or, gatherings. So I know one barber has mentioned that he really wants to do work similar topics with fathers and sons together to talk about relationships. So they really enjoy the Bus for Safety campaign and want to do more from it. So we're really excited about that. The event I mentioned that we had last night, one of the barbers came and spoke at it. So we continue working together, whether it's Bus for Safety or outside of that. So it's been a great partnership.
Let's have questions for you all now. So you all Sure. So I guess it could be by table, but it seems like actually maybe the front two tables together. But we want to give you guys the space to like think about your agency and just think about the work that you do. And just think about any ways that you could apply kind of just what we've been talking about to your work. And so Jen did a good job of thinking when she's mentioning just like partnerships with the youth, think about the partnerships you already have, or you can just possibly think about new ones you might want to see. So we just thought it was easier to do things to kind of talk. And so what we do is trying to talk with each other and go to each question and kind of see what it means for your organization.
Well, the questions are here for the audience, so I didn't have 20. Is that right? 15 minutes to go through. I think the first 2 questions are probably the most